Welcome back to the RinkMasters Podcast. My name is Tyler Kroom, and I'm joined here with my good friend Chris Penner. We're going to be doing our Montreal Canadiens breakdown, and we thought we'd bring on our buddies, Cam Allen. He's a diehard Montreal Canadiens fan, and welcome to the podcast.
Oh, it's good to be here, Kroom. It's good to finally hear your sexy voice, and it's good to be here. I'm just happy to be here and talk about my team.
Well, it's really good to have you. Oh my God, this Walter.
Well, you told me that. I don't think that was too bad.
No, it wasn't. It just caught me off guard.
Me too. Oh my goodness.
Let's go into the bloopers.
That's good. That was good. All right. So yeah, we're gonna talk about the
Okay.
All right. So yeah, we're gonna talk about the Montreal Canadiens here. And so Cam, from your perspective, what are the Montreal Canadiens going to be looking like this year? Playoff hopefuls, contenders, on the bubble?
Well, I'm going to say on the bubble for a playoff spot. I think it's pretty much confirmed now that they're going to be in an all-Canadian division, and I have to admit that's going to be tough, even with the roster moves we've made this season. I do like the roster moves we've made, and I think Bergevin definitely improved the team, but it's definitely going to be pretty tough to make the playoffs in that all-Canadian division if that goes through, because, there's some good teams. Toronto obviously will be probably contending for the top there in the regular season. Edmonton will be up there too. You can't count out McDavid. And Calgary looks an all-around team. They've made some good off-season moves too. And Vancouver will probably be looking for a playoff spot too. So, if you look at that, it's going to be some tough competition for sure.
Definitely. I'm going to look at the off-season moves that they've made. And, last year they had a good enough team to get into the play-ins. Carey Price he was doing Carey Price things. He was spectacular. I've been impressed with these off-season moves. What do you think about the Josh Anderson trade and signing? And what do you think the departure of Domi is going to do to the team?
It's a high-risk, high-reward trade. It's something the Habs really need is some size. Josh Anderson, if he can refine that form that he was in just the season before he got injured there when Columbus upset the Tampa Bay Lightning, if he can play like that for the majority of the season and not get injured, then it's going to be a solid trade. But I actually think he can probably find some good chemistry with Nick Suzuki and Drouin on a line. I think if we have a guy his size playing with Drouin, I think it could open his game up a bit. He might be able to play a bit more comfortably and, really maybe be a bit better than how he has performed the last couple seasons. And the departure of Domi it's going to be a loss for sure. He's he's a solid player. I think he'll do good in Columbus for sure under Tortorella. But with the Habs' newfound center depth and the emergence of Kotkaniemi and Suzuki, he did become a bit expendable. And, you got to give to get in today's market. And, he was just the most obvious first choice to trade over. I know there was some rumors about Danault, but, I think Danault is a pretty key piece of the Montreal Canadiens going forward. So I'm glad we kept him instead.
Yeah, definitely. And I like that you brought in the fact that Anderson could help open up the ice for Jonathan Drouin and help influence his game. I know Chris and I had talked about that before coming on the podcast today. So we're going to talk about players also being expendable. Chris, do you think that the signing of Tyler Toffoli will impact and make Thomas Tatar's future in Montreal be put in question?
I think that's a good question because you look at their winger situation in Montreal, and it's not a bad problem to have. Having a guy like Thomas Tatar, you got Jonathan Drouin, You got Tyler Toffoli. All those guys are very good wingers, but at the same time, are you willing to pay a guy that much amount of money to play on your third line? I mean, all those guys are going to be good pieces on the power play, but are they really going to want to play with that limited ice time? I think if they're a team type of guy and they want to win and they feel like that team's in the contention to go a long way, which Montreal could do, depending on how certain players perform this year. But I think it can make some of those guys like Thomas Tatar expendable for sure.
Yeah, definitely. I really liked Tatar's game in Montreal. It seemed like when he got to Vegas in that trade from Detroit a couple seasons ago, he didn't really fit the system or the mold there and kind of struggled to find that touch. And, he's part of the Pacioretty trade, comes over to Montreal and just an instant fit. I've really liked watching Tatar, especially in the playoffs there for the Montreal Canadiens. And also we're talking about playoff performances. Nick Suzuki and Kotkaniemi really came into their own there and were legit top 6 centers. And I think that's amazing. Cam, do you think that they can carry that on into this upcoming season?
It's going to be interesting. That's one of the big questions for me too. Obviously Suzuki had a pretty good rookie season to start with 41 points in 71 games as a 20-year-old. That's pretty good. Kotkaniemi obviously didn't quite have the season he was hoping for. He got sent down to Laval, and he did put up over a point per game there in Laval for a bit. But it's going to be interesting for sure. The playoffs is a short sample size, and without fans, it's kind of hard to make a judgment whether they're going to be able to carry that over, because it's just such different atmosphere and stuff. So it's going to be, if they don't, it's going to be a big problem for the Habs, because if they start struggling again, then we're going to have Deneau as the top center. He's going to be played in all situations, and he's more of a defensive kind of guy, a guy you want to send out if you need to win a face-off, or you're on the penalty kill. You don't want to. He's been playing like top line center in Montreal for the past couple seasons, and he's done quite good in that role, but he's just not quite the top center on most teams. He's going to be a second or third line center for sure. And so I'm hoping Suzuki and Kotkaniemi can carry it over, but it'll be interesting because there'll be more games in a shorter span this season too. Yeah. So that'll obviously add more stress to those guys. And now they'll have that expectation going forward too, because with that, how they played in the playoffs, they're going to be expected to do that this whole season. So it's going to be interesting for sure.
Yeah, and that's just it. There's going to be a lot of heightened expectations on guys like Kotkaniemi and Suzuki coming into this next season. I think that's a good reason why they should keep Deneau around for this season. He's I'd consider him to be more of a veteran guy, and like you said, he's really good in the defensive zone. He wins those faceoffs, kills those penalties, and I've always said that he is a poor man's Patrice Bergeron. He's not going to have quite the offensive upside as him, but in terms of the defensive zone play, he's right there, right?
Exactly.
And so I think, for Montreal to have success next season, that is extremely key. Now, let's talk a bit about the defense. So last year, I wasn't a big fan of the defense. I know that Shea Weber and Petrie did their thing. They were the core. Their left side was hurting. They got Ben Sherratt, who he did good being on that pairing with Shea Weber. I don't think that's where he naturally fits, though, and therefore he got exposed a couple of times. It didn't quite fit. Alexander Romanov, he's coming over from the KHL. Do you think that he's going to be able to jump in right away? And what type of impact is he going to have? Also, what are your thoughts on Joel Edmondson in the Montreal Canadiens?
Romanov's an interesting one because he's coming over from an already pro league. So I think he'll get a shot. I don't see management sending him down to start. I think he definitely starts in the starting lineup, but I probably as like a second pair or third pair. I don't think you should just throw your prospect out there as the top pair yet. And I honestly think his best stat will probably be plus minus, because he's kind of one of those guys. He's a good passer. He makes a great first pass and good. He's really good at exiting the zone, which is something Montreal really needs. And I actually had the pleasure of watching Romanov in Kamloops live for the Canada-Russia series. And he made some great passes, great stretch passes from the zone, almost out to center ice, clean passes. So, and he's only 5'11", but he's 185 pounds and he plays like an absolute bulldog. He plays a big game for his size. He loves to hit and he brings a physical game too. And that's something Montreal needs. And he does get pucks to the net too. So it'll be interesting to see if he can get some, it'll be interesting to see what his offensive upside is in the NHL for sure.
Yeah, for sure. And Chris, what do you think Joel Edmondson is going to do for the Montreal Canadiens this year?
I mean, I've always liked Joel Edmondson's game. I know he played for the Blazers for a little bit in the WHL. Really liked his game there. Had an excellent shot. Played a good, shutdown game on the defensive end. So I think he'd be a good guy on the penalty kill. He's getting up to that age. Well, he's 27. So I think whoever he plays with is going to complement the other person's game, so to speak. So I think if, say, Joel Edmondson is playing with Jeff Petrie, I think that complements Jeff Petrie's game even more to let him, do his thing as much as he does, especially what we've seen in the playoffs too, which was really well played by Jeff Petrie for sure.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. And when we're going through Cap Friendly, I'm looking at the defensive, options and trying to figure out how I'd pair this defenseman. And like, to me, it was almost a no-brainer that Romanov was into the lineup there. And I had a hard time on that second pairing because for me, like, I thought Romanov could also be a good fit there for Petrie. At the same time, Edmondson also complements Petrie's game. And then Sherratt, I mean, I currently did leave him on that top pair with Weber because it did seem to work. But I would like to see a world where Romanov ends up this season playing on that top pair with Weber.
Me too, actually. Romanov's speed would be able to help Weber out a bit. Mete actually played not too bad with Weber, and it seems whoever gets paired with Weber on the left side actually plays a bit better than they actually are. Like, yeah. Sherratt actually had a pretty good season as far as his standards go, playing top pair all season and in the playoffs too. Mete looked like a great prospect for us back when he was playing with Weber, but he kind of fizzled out and kind of came back down to earth a bit. And now he's playing on that third line. And there was some rumors about him potentially leaving Montreal this season, but he's still here. So it'll be, I still have some expectations for Mete. He can move the puck around and get some pucks to the net. So.
No, certainly. And, with Ben Sherratt, his value is going to be a little bit higher right now, especially coming off of the way he played in the playoffs. He's got a modified no trade clause. Another team that could be looking to beef up their defense a little bit would be Winnipeg. Do you think if you're Montreal looking to clear cap, if you're Bergevin, do you think that you'd be able to convince Sherratt to waive it, to go back to Winnipeg, to free up some cap space and, bring some picks back over?
Well, I think that totally depends. That situation depends on how Romanov does. If Romanov plays really well, then you can totally look at moving someone out on the left side. But the way Montreal's left side is right now, I don't think you look at moving too many people on the left side if you're going to move somebody. It's not the greatest right now. I think if Sherratt does leave, it's because Romanov emerges and becomes that player that he's expected to be.
Do you think Kulak would be able to play a more full-time position with Montreal Canadiens this year on the left side?
He did show a bit of promise in the playoffs, and a lot of fans saw it too. I know there was actually a lot of talk about Kulak playing, like keeping Kulak around. I think he'll be he's a solid third pair guy for now, just to help Romanov adjust to the North American game a bit more. And he's just a good depth guy. You can never have too much depth on defense. Injuries start to pile up, especially in the playoffs. It can pile up pretty fast. So,
for sure. All right, so Chris, I'm going to talk to you about the goaltending here. So, of course, they acquired Jake Allen from the St. Louis Blues and also extended him beyond this next season. Carey Price, I still believe he is the best goalie in the NHL. Injuries have kind of caught up to him a little bit. what type of impact is Jake Allen going to bring to that goaltending situation in Montreal, and how's that going to really affect Price's health and long-term performance?
Yeah, you make a good point about the long-term health and Price's performance, because you're right. Injuries have, caught up to Carey Price, because he is still one of, if not the most elite goaltender in the NHL. So when you look at Jake Allen, he provided some good games for St. Louis, especially in the play-in when Jordan Binnington, struggled big time. And with Jake Allen, he came in and gave him, a shot to win in a lot of those games. So I think he allows Price to take some more breathers and doesn't necessarily put all the pressure on Carey Price that he needs to go out there day in, day out and win every single game for the team, knowing that Jake Allen can also come in there if he's not 100% and give the Canadiens a really good shot to win too.
Yeah, I totally agree. And so given Cam, you brought up the Canadian division, that's looking to be pretty solidified. Where would you rank them? If you had to rank the Canadian teams, where would they lie?
Oh man, that's a tough question. There's a lot of the talent in that division. I'm really excited for it. It's one of those things that I've thought about like every day. I think all Canadians would be pretty hyped for it, but I think you got to give if we're going ranking, my rankings would probably top at I think you got to go with Toronto. It's pretty hard to bet against them. They're a pretty good regular season team.
Yeah.
No matter how you look at it, unfortunately, it kills me to say that, but they are. And I think Montreal, in my opinion, would probably be. I don't think they'll be near the top. It's hard for me to say that as a fan. I'm trying to be optimistic for the season, but there's just so much talent in the Canadian division. You got to look at it like this. Like, can we compete with Edmonton? They got McDavid, Draisaitl, the 250 goal scorers. Calgary's so deep too. They have some great players, and now picking up Markstrom, they look pretty serious. Winnipeg too, their defense is a bit shaky, but with Hellebuck on the back, he had a great season. Definitely deserved the Vezina, and they have some very good offensive talent. I think Winnipeg. A lot of people are counting Winnipeg out with the defense, but I think with Scheifele there and Ehlers and Stastny now too, I think Winnipeg will be looking at top 4 in that division. A lot of people wouldn't agree with me there, but I'm a big fan of what Scheifele can do and those guys. And I think they should have beaten Calgary in the playoffs or in the play-in. Sorry, if Scheifele didn't get injured.
And Line.
And yeah, Line too. I forgot about that one. Yeah, that's a good point. As a Montreal fan, I got to be optimistic, but in the division that we're in, I don't think actually the Canadian division benefits Montreal very much.
Yeah. Well, that's just another thing too. Like when you look at the division, there's a lot of good teams in there, and you mentioned that people are kind of counting out Winnipeg because of their defense. Well, I mean, they did the same thing last year, right? And Hellebuck proved to be more than good enough to carry that team afloat defensively. So we'll see where it happens to lie. I think really the only team that I would really just count out of contention for being a playoff team out of that division would be the Ottawa Senators. And I think Chris and I touched on that last week, and yes, we'll see what happens there for sure. So Chris and I, we toyed around on Cap Friendly with the Montreal Canadiens roster. So we're going to open it up here, and Cam, let us know what you think. So ultimately we made one move. We traded Jordan Wheel to the New Jersey Devils for a 2022 fifth-round pick just to free up some cap space to help give us some wiggle room to make some moves. And then this is really what we had come up with here for the offense. So we've got Tyler Toffoli on that top line with Nick Suzuki and Brendan Gallagher. The second line is built up of Jonathan Drouin, Philip Deneau, and Josh Anderson. Now the third line, Thomas Tatar, Jesperi Kotkaniemi, and Joel Armia. Then the fourth line of Arturi Lakonen, Ryan Folling, and Paul Byron. What do you think about that forward group?
I like it. It's quite similar to what I would have. Personally, the only thing I would switch around would probably be I'd put Drouin with Suzuki to at least to start the season to see how it goes, because Drouin and Suzuki had some good chemistry in the playoffs there. Both of them were tied for the the team lead for points in the playoffs. And I'd like to see Josh Anderson play with Suzuki and Drouin to start, just because I really do think Josh Anderson will help free up Drouin's game a bit. And with that, I'd move down, obviously, Brendan Gallagher with Deneau, and I might put Tatar with Deneau and Gallagher, because that line had some good chemistry in the regular season this year too. So, I'd like to see them. But with Claude Julien, he always switches the lines around quite often. So, I'd imagine there'll be quite a few different line combinations we'll see in the regular season, especially since there's going to be such a shortened schedule. There'll probably be some line juggling, especially if one line, starts struggling. Then with the shortened season, they'll probably be switching it up, trying to find chemistry as fast as they can.
Yeah, definitely. And looking at the defense here, I mean, that's kind of similar to what we talked about before. Chris, what are your thoughts on that defense?
It definitely goes back to what we were talking about before. Cam mentioned it perfectly. The left side's an issue. I don't think there's any way around it. They did make obviously the acquisition of Edmondson, Romanov coming in there. And like we said, if Romanov can excel in the NHL, I think their defense is definitely on the up and definitely has the potential to be a better defense than it is on paper. But all in all, it's good, but it's definitely not elite, but it has the potential to be good for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And, one kind of goes back. We talked about the future of Thomas Tatar in Montreal, and, maybe there's a possibility that they package him up in a deal to bring over a legit top 4 defender to really complement the defense there in Montreal. All right. And I think the goaltending is pretty self-explanatory, right? Carey Price is going to greatly benefit from having Jake Allen as his backup. Jake Allen can very comfortably take 30, 40 games if need be. So that definitely takes a lot of stress off Carey Price. And I think overall that potentially gives Montreal the best goaltending tandem in the National Hockey League. I
was actually against the Jake Allen acquiring of first, only because it's about $15 million on 2 goalies, so it is a bit much. But I actually talked to you about it, Karoom, and like you said, the $1 million goalie thing, it really didn't work out for us at all. So I'm way more on board now with this, and I'm quite excited for it, because in the playoffs it seems to be it really gets defensive, and goalies, if you have a solid goalie in the playoffs, it can be quite the difference. And I think with this tandem, it's definitely going to help us out for sure.
Well, definitely. And, the big upside to this too is, it's only 1 year at 4.35 with Jake Allen, and they extended him, I think, for 2 years or 3 more.
Yeah, 2 years. 2 years.
But he's making half that salary. He's only going to be making, I think, 2.5 or something like that. I could be wrong, but I know it is somewhere in the 2 million realm. And I think that's just absolute steal for the type of goaltending he can provide for the Montreal Canadiens. There we go. All right. Well, that concludes our Montreal Canadiens breakdown here on the RinkMasters Podcast. Thanks for tuning in, and keep following us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter for the next updates on our upcoming podcasts. And we hope to see you next week.